The classroom buzzed with chatter and the clatter of books as students settled into their seats. It was the start of a new semester, and Ms. Ramirez, the literature teacher, was known for her engaging but demanding classes. Her room was filled with motivational quotes, student projects, and shelves packed with novels. She loved teaching, not just because of the subject, but because she believed every student had a story and it was her job to read between the lines. During the first week, she noticed him. He always sat at the back of the class, his eyes heavy, his posture slouched. His name was Elijah. While most students showed up energized and at least half prepared, Elijah looked like he hadn't slept in days. The first time she caught him dozing off, she chalked it up to adjustment issues. But the second time, she watched a little longer. He didn't just nod off, he surrendered to sleep like someone who hadn't rested in days. Ms. Ramirez was strict but fair. She called his name. He jerked awake, startled and embarrassed. The other students snickered, but she hushed them with a glance. "Let's talk after class," she said gently. When the bell rang, students filed out, gossip already forming about Elijah's nap. Ms. Ramirez sat at her desk as Elijah approached, eyes downcast. "Elijah, are you okay?" she asked. "This is the second time you've fallen asleep in class." "I'm sorry," he muttered. "It won't happen again." She studied his face. He wasn't defiant. He wasn't lazy. He looked tired, not just from a lack of sleep, but from something heavier. She considered pressing further but decided not to corner him on the first week. "All right, just know I'm here if you need to talk." He nodded and left quickly, his shoulders still weighed down by something invisible. Days passed, and the pattern continued. Elijah came to class, took notes quietly, and somewhere between second and third period, sleep claimed him again. This time Ms. Ramirez didn't wake him. Instead, she let the class continue and watched. At lunch, she headed to the teacher's lounge, where she casually asked around. "Anyone know anything about Elijah from my third period?" she asked. A math teacher looked up from her sandwich. "Quiet kid, but I've seen him in the library during lunch. Never with friends, always alone." That evening, she stayed late to grade papers. As she packed up to leave, she noticed a figure through the classroom window. Curious, she stepped outside and followed from a distance. Elijah was walking not toward the bus stop but in the opposite direction, down a narrow side street. He didn't look around. He just walked, fast and focused. She shouldn't have followed, but something told her there was more to this story. About 10 blocks away, he turned into a small neighborhood. The houses here were older, some with peeling paint and rusted gates. She saw him slip into a tiny apartment complex. One light turned on in a window, and then everything went still. She didn't go any further. Instead, she drove home, a heaviness settling on her chest. That night, she couldn't stop thinking about him, about how often we judge students by their performance, not their circumstance. The next day, she came up with an idea, an anonymous writing assignment. She asked the class to write about a challenge they were facing or had overcome. "No names," she said. "Just write honestly. I'll be the only one who reads it." The next morning, she read through the stack. Most entries were predictable failing grades, friendship drama, pressure from parents. But one letter made her pause. It was written with clarity, emotion, and exhaustion. "Some nights I work until 2 a.m. at the diner. My mom's been sick for months, and the bills keep piling up. I can't let us fall behind. My little sister is only 9. I get her ready for school, make her breakfast, then head to class. I try to stay awake. I really do. But some days, my body gives out. I don't want pity. I just want people to stop thinking I'm lazy." Ms. Ramirez knew it was Elijah. She folded the letter gently, her throat tight. The next day, when he came in, she didn't mention the letter. Instead, she asked him to stay after class again. "Elijah," she said softly, "you're doing more than most people ever see, but you don't have to carry it alone." He looked up, startled. His eyes searched hers for a hint of judgment, but found none. "I don't want anyone to know," he said quietly. "I won't tell anyone, but maybe there's something I can do to help." For the first time, he smiled, a small, tired smile, but a smile nonetheless. From that day, Ms. Ramirez made small adjustments. She allowed Elijah to submit assignments digitally at night instead of first thing in the morning. She offered him quiet space in the library during lunch where he could rest or catch up. And more than anything, she made sure he felt seen. But still, she wanted to do more. She reached out to the school counselor, careful not to reveal Elijah's identity at first. They discussed options: financial aid, meal assistance, even scholarship programs. Weeks turned into months. Elijah's eyes still showed signs of fatigue, but there was a new light in them too, a sense that someone was finally rooting for him. Then came the midterm project. The class had to write and present a personal story inspired by a piece of literature. When it was Elijah's turn, he stood in front of the class, clutching a sheet of paper. His voice trembled at first, but then it grew steady. "I used to think being strong meant hiding everything, that if I just worked hard enough, no one had to know I was struggling. But then I read of mice and men, and I realized even the strongest people need someone. Even George had Lenny. Even Lenny had George." The room was silent. No one laughed. No one whispered. Even the class clown looked away, eyes wet. After he finished, Ms. Ramirez led the applause. That day, Elijah wasn't the kid who slept in class. He was the kid who stood up, told his truth, and inspired everyone else to be a little braver. But his journey was far from over. Challenges still loomed, and choices had to be made. The secret he had carried for so long wasn't just about exhaustion. There was more buried beneath, waiting to be unearthed. And soon, a moment would come that would test everything he'd learned. The day after Elijah's presentation, something shifted in the classroom atmosphere. He was no longer invisible. Classmates who never spoke to him before offered nods in the hallway. One student even slid over at lunch and asked if he wanted to sit together. Elijah, still guarded, hesitated but nodded. Ms. Ramirez observed from a distance, heart full. She knew one presentation couldn't fix everything, but it was a start. Elijah had spoken, and people had listened. He had let the world peek into his pain, and instead of mocking him, it respected him. But not all victories are permanent. 2 weeks later, Elijah didn't show up to class. Not on Monday. Not on Tuesday. By Wednesday, Ms. Ramirez was worried. She checked the attendance system. Excused absence, it said, but there were no details. That night, she emailed the counselor. The next morning they met. Elijah's mother was hospitalized. The counselor explained, voice heavy. Liver complications. She's been ill for a while. Ms. Ramirez sighed. She had suspected something was wrong for a long time, but hearing it confirmed brought a different kind of weight. Is he with his sister? Yes. He's taking care of everything. Cooking, school pickup, groceries. He's essentially the parent now. The teacher nodded, silent for a long moment. Does he need support? Food vouchers? Emergency grants? The counselor nodded. We're working on it, but he's hard to reach. He doesn't want help. Ms. Ramirez stood up. Then maybe he needs someone to show him it's okay to accept it. That afternoon, she visited the apartment complex. It wasn't something teachers usually did, but this wasn't a usual situation. She brought a care package, groceries, school supplies, a few essentials, and knocked. It took a long time for the door to open. When it did, Elijah stood there, eyes ringed with exhaustion, his little sister clinging to his side. Ms. Ramirez? I just wanted to check in, she said softly. You don't have to let me in. I just thought you might need a break. He didn't speak. He just opened the door wider and stepped back. The apartment was small and dimly lit. Clean, but clearly worn by time and pressure. A few drawings by his sister hung on the fridge. There were books stacked on the kitchen table, schoolwork that hadn't been touched in days. Elijah sat down slowly, rubbing his eyes. His sister sat across from him, swinging her legs and watching the visitors shyly. She misses her mom, he said. Keeps asking when she's coming back. Ms. Ramirez sat across from them, choosing her words carefully. And what about you? How are you holding up? He chuckled bitterly. I'm holding up because I have to. I don't have a choice. She reached into her bag and pulled out an envelope. This is from the school. Emergency funding. It's not much, but it can help with groceries and bills. He shook his head. I can't take that. There are others who there's no line. she interrupted gently. Help doesn't run out when one person takes it. And you're not taking anything you don't deserve. He sat in silence for a while. Then, finally, he reached for the envelope. After that day, Elijah returned to school. He wasn't the same, but in some ways, he was stronger. The exhaustion still lived behind his eyes, but so did something new: resilience, determination, hope. Ms. Ramirez continued to support him quietly. She encouraged him to join a mentorship program. At first, he resisted, but after a few sessions, he started to open up to his mentor, a former student who had once been in a similar situation. That connection gave him someone outside school to talk to, someone who truly understood the storm he was weathering. The months passed. His mother slowly recovered and returned home under strict medical supervision. The family dynamic was still fragile, but it was no longer breaking. Elijah now had help both from adults and from classmates who had come to admire his quiet strength. Senior year came around. College talk filled the halls. Most students were excited, some nervous. Elijah, however, wasn't sure if he could even apply. Not with bills still looming, not with his mom's health always hanging by a thread. One afternoon, Ms. Ramirez asked him to stay after class once more. I nominated you for a scholarship, she said, sliding a folder across the desk. He looked stunned. But I haven't even you wrote an essay, she interrupted. Remember that anonymous assignment? I kept it. I shared it with your permission, of course. He opened the folder. Inside was a letter. Congratulations. You've been selected for the Rising Resilience Award, which grants a full ride to any in-state university. His mouth fell open. He blinked, then read it again. This can't be real. It is, she said, smiling, because you're real, and your story matters. That night, Elijah walked home slower than usual, not because he was tired, but because he was soaking it in. The way the sunset painted the sky, the way his little sister ran to hug him when he came in the door, the way his mom's tired smile still had light in it. For once, the future wasn't a wall he had to climb. It was a road long and winding, yes, but walkable. Graduation day came. Elijah stood in a cap and gown that felt too big, but he wore it like armor. His name was called, and he walked across the stage to thunderous applause, not just from classmates, but from teachers, counselors, even the principal who had read his essay and been moved to tears. After the ceremony, Ms. Ramirez found him standing with his family, diploma in hand. You made it, she said, pride shining in her eyes. He nodded, looking down at the paper, then back at her. Because you believed in me when no one else did. She shook her head. No, you made it because you never gave up. I just reminded you that you didn't have to do it alone. Years later, Ms. Ramirez would receive a letter in the mail. No return address, but inside was a photo: Elijah, in a suit, standing in front of a college campus, next to his sister, now a teenager. There was a note. Dear Ms. Ramirez, I'm starting my final year, majoring in education. I want to be a teacher because someone once found me asleep in class and didn't see a failure. She saw a fighter. Elijah, she placed the letter in a box labeled Reasons I Teach, and with a full heart, she went back to her classroom ready to find the next Elijah, sitting quietly in the back, just waiting for someone to see past the surface.